Welcome to the Demystifying Money podcast, where each week you will hear unforgettable conversations with expert guests about success, money, business, and small steps you can take to elevate your life and wealth. Now here's your host, Misty Lynch.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for the Demystifying Money podcast. I'm your host, Misty Lynch, and today I'm joined by Sara Stalker. She is a triple threat in the healing space. She's a licensed psychotherapist, a specialized addiction expert, and an intuitive coach. She has credentials in both sex addiction, multiple addictions, and eating disorders, and specializes in complex intersections where betrayal trauma meets disordered coping mechanisms. I was really interested in talking with Sara today because while all of the work that she's doing with addiction and behavior, it might sound like it doesn't have much to do when it demystifying money or finances, but I believe that there is a lot of behaviors that do have a very direct financial impact on people's lives. And I think that it's a really complicated topic to potentially approach. And so I thought it would be great to speak with her about her tips and advice for dealing with this behavior if it's you, if it's your partner, if it's your child, and really trying to dig into what's changing out there in the environment and the access that we have to all of these potentially addictive types of, activities and behavior out there. So, Sara, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Misty. I really appreciate it.
This episode of Demystifying Money with Misty Lynch is proudly sponsored by Soundview Financial Advisors. Visit www.soundviewfinancialadvisors.com to learn more.
I'd love to hear a little bit about how you got into the work that you do and what kind of brought you towards wanting to help people with addiction in particular.
So I have my own personal experience with being with a partner who struggled with a couple of addictions. And I know how hard it can be as a betrayed partner and not having support out there. There's so much shame and guilt with the person who's struggling with addiction, but partners also struggle with shame and guilt. And it's often very isolating. They don't want to talk to other people about it. They don't want to be judged. They don't want their partner to be judged. So I felt like I needed to do this work to help people.
Yeah. No, I feel like a lot of us kind of come to our careers by feeling that calling. And, I feel like especially the perspective that you mentioned being important because yes, there's, somebody dealing with addiction, but also the people around the people, the partners there's an impact there too, but there's still the same shame, the same guilt as if this was your own experience, but it's just different. So when I think about financial betrayal and trust, I typically think about people who are maybe spending money on affairs or hiding money or stealing, like taking, and so I feel like that tends to impact a person's sense of like safety and security when they feel like there's been a financial betrayal going on. But I'm curious from your perspective, like how do you define financial betrayal from like the psychological and the relationship perspective?
So financial betrayal is exactly what you said. It's violating that safety, that sense of safety, because when you get into a partnership with somebody, you are usually giving your heart and your soul in the relationship and trusting that person with everything. It's not just about the relationship, like the sexual component. You have kids, but then the finances is a huge sense of safety, and whether it's a childhood trauma piece or it's something that isn't related to childhood trauma, there is that need for security. Mm-hmm. So when someone gaslights you or they're betrayed, if you have, I always say, trust your gut. If your gut says something is off and you ask your partner a question about looking at an account or how come this money is missing and they gaslight you, then that also causes more insecurity and feelings of betrayal. And if you have, it can actually lead to PTSD.
Yeah.
It's really scary because let's be honest, money makes the world go round. It is what we need to survive.
Is that why like money secrecy can feel as painful as like a romantic betrayal? Because I've talked to some people that feel real like it is really a difficult thing to deal with when you discover some, financial infidelity or betrayal. But does it all come down to the same emotions or the basic needs like you were saying before?
I think for a lot of people it does. It really does. It can be devastating. I mean, I'm not talking about any specific clients or
Hmm.
situations, but whether someone has a gambling addiction and it means losing your home, or your children's education fund,
Hmm.
that can cause a significant trauma, which I would say could be PTSD. You think about your nervous system, you think about hypervigilance, you think about then not trusting your partner.
Hmm.
And how is that going to be going forward? So now your partner has to earn that trust back and help repair, which is a whole other piece.
Yeah. So when it comes to, and I think there is, there's obviously a lot of shame and guilt around this behavior. But what would you say in your work when you work with people who do maybe start to, are there any signs or any things that people should be aware of or maybe look out for if they feel like there is maybe, an interest that now is maybe slowly becoming a compulsive habit or addiction when it comes to, your partner? Because sometimes we have blinders on, and I feel like people feel like, oh, there was, this happened out of the blue, or I had no idea that this was happening. But is there anything that you think that people maybe should be, on the lookout for or maybe aware of when it comes to behavior like this?
Definitely. And actually, I just recently talked about betrayal blindness, which is also an issue. I think so there are two things. So you could perhaps have a gut feeling that something is off. You might notice a change in behavior in your partner. You may notice they're more irritable. They
Hmm.
could be, a little more um, isolating. They could be more into themselves. They're not really engaging with the family or with you. If you have kids, maybe they're not spending as much time with the kids. That would be a red flag. That would be something I would say, well, what's going on? And if you were to ask your partner, well, are you okay? Is there something you want to talk about? And they brush it off, they downplay it, or they gaslight you, then I would definitely do some more investigation into that. But some people who have, I call betrayal blindness, I didn't make up the term, but some people, it's too scary to confront their partner about it. And that usually goes back to their own childhood trauma. But change in behavior for sure. If there is, like if you do have access to the accounts and you notice some strange payments have gone through or missing money or anything like that, then I would ask the questions.
Yeah. No, and I think that that is something, and I tell people to like look at accounts and look at spending and look at these statements all the time. And there's a huge reluctance sometimes for people to do that. And I think
Mhm.
that we sometimes we don't want to know in some ways until like we have to, or sometimes people don't pay attention until there's a divorce or there's something massive that makes them pay attention. But I do think that that is some good like red flags to look out for if behavior starts to change or you are seeing some, different recurring expenses because I always do kind of think about things from this financial lens. I can't help it, but addictions are expensive
Mhm.
typically. Can you tell me what your thoughts are about what people would potentially like how that behavior becomes something where maybe somebody would start to dip into a child's college fund or risk their house? Like how does it get to that point when you're working with people that are kind of in like experiencing those kind of behaviors? Because a lot of times people, it doesn't start out that way in the relationship. So I'm curious from your perspective, kind of what happens that makes people feel like that is the option that they need to do.
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Addictions are very powerful. And if you are, let's take a gambling addiction, for example. So now it's more accessible. You can use your phone, right? In Canada, we have online gambling. In the US, you have online gambling, and that just makes it a lot scarier for for partners.
Mhm.
But for someone struggling with the addiction, that accessibility, that dopamine hit, um, they just get it's that cycle of addiction. And then there's usually shame and guilt in that cycle as well, but it just keeps feeding itself. And the accessibility is scary, and I think that's a
Yeah.
big problem.
No, and I think that that's something that we've definitely seen an increase in with gambling, with the sex addiction. I mean, I think I saw
Mhm.
a staggering number about what I think it was Mr. Beast or somebody was spending on OnlyFans a month. It was ma millions. It was massive amounts of money. And I just, I even, I feel like even just more people being on their phone so much, it is really, you are able to do this, privately. It's
Mhm.
very different than having to like go out and go to Vegas to gamble or go have an affair with somebody. It's just, but I feel like the financial impact and the emotional impact can be just as damaging when even though it's maybe something that's happening like right with the person sitting on the couch next to you in the living room, which is just crazy to think
It
of how that's
is.
changed.
No, it's really scary. And actually, in the sex addiction world,
Mhm.
um, once a betrayed partner finds out about their partner's addiction, we have this process called a disclosure. And part of that disclosure involves the finances.
Mhm.
So everything, every penny that was spent on that addiction is brought forward to the betrayed partner so that they're aware. And often the addict really struggles with finding those numbers and writing them down and having to face their partner with those amounts of money because it can be staggering and very scary.
Yeah. And what role does shame play in hidden spending or debt from your perspective?
The shame, it comes from childhood trauma,
Mhm.
but it plays a huge role whenever there's secrecy. People often ask me, well, how do you know if it's an addiction?
Mhm.
Well, if you're hiding it, if you feel shame and guilt after you do whatever it is, whether it's a substance or gambling or part of a sex addiction, um, then it's most likely an addiction because it's probably affecting your family, could be affecting your job. It's probably changed your personality in terms of anger, irritability, isolation, um, and that that isolation which happens with the shame, I think then causes a bigger, um, I was call it like a crack in the foundation in a
Yeah.
relationship. So it's hard. It's very hard. And I always encourage try to find a therapist. Unfortunately, usually people hit rock bottom, they get discovered.
Yeah.
We call it, discovery D-Day
Mhm.
in our world, and that's a devastating day for a betrayed partner and for the addict.
Mhm. Yeah. No, and I feel like I don't necessarily always see that because when people come to a financial planner, um, they're willing to, turn over, the books, show everything. And I have seen some people who really do want to engage and their partner's reluctant. And usually it ends up that they don't move forward. Or they say, can I just do my stuff? Can you just help me? And I feel like, sometimes that's a control thing, but other times it could be because there might be things that they don't want brought to the surface yet. So I do feel like that's occasionally a red flag that has kind of come up with certain clients where somebody is really hoping for a third party to come in and help. So it's interesting that you do have that discovery day because that is probably what I see that more is, in divorce proceedings when all of the cards are on the table and it's shocking. But I feel like there is sometimes work that can be done during the relationship to help repair it
A
if
hundred percent.
there is that willingness to, you know, to communicate about it. So,
Yeah.
have you seen anything that's been like, successful or helpful for somebody who maybe feels like they might be headed down a path that is going to get, you know, very painful? Any things that's kind of helped make partners like recover from, these types of addictive behavior?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, one thing, first of all, is getting help
Mhm.
and for you to be completely honest full disclosure, not hiding anything. When you actually talk about everything that you have done that is a betrayal in a relationship, it lifts a big weight off of you. And that is the first step to moving forward into healing. And then to help your betrayed partner is a big part of it as well.
Yeah.
But you know what, I always encourage individual therapy and then couples therapy. I work with a lot of couples as well. Um, Communication and vulnerability is huge. That's really the key.
Yeah. You mentioned, and I'm just curious about this. I have two children, and you mentioned, childhood trauma having a lot of impact on all of these things. And I'm curious, like, do partners not talk about, like, should this be brought up sooner as about like certain things? Because sometimes I'll ask people just when I meet them, what money was like for them growing up, and they'll usually tell me. And
Mhm.
there's usually shame and guilt somewhere, whether it's I had everything and I never had to pay any bills or debt, and I feel bad that my partner had to, or that everybody else I knew had student loans or something. Or we had nothing and I'm terrified of running out of money. I've rarely meet somebody who says like money was great. Like we had a perfect, like I have a very healthy, like there's usually something happens. So can you explain to me like when you say like childhood trauma, like is that necessarily an event or is it sometimes just, some beliefs or feelings that we hold on to that don't serve us?
It usually it's more of a small T trauma. So it's not like a huge event
Like we
where
lost
the
our house in a fire or everybody got, yeah,
it,
yeah. Okay.
exactly. I mean that does happen. I hear that a
Sure.
lot. But it's usually my dad worked two jobs
Hmm.
and my mom and dad always fought about
Hmm.
money. And when you're a child, your brain absorbs everything. Your nervous system absorbs everything. So if you grew up in a household where there was always this fear around money and there's not enough, of course you're going to take that into your adult life and your relationship. But I think it's important for couples when they start off in their relationship to have difficult conversations. Do you want to have kids? Do what are your spending habits? Um, do you have fear or anxiety around money? What are your expectations? I think those conversations should really be had early on.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's helpful sometimes even just to understand where someone's coming from. And I feel like, I had more scarcity and, financial, you know, ups and downs than my husband did. So he understands that sometimes he might not panic about anything.
Mm.
Because he's like, it always works out. And we're like, at least I know why he feels that way. And it's not, he's wrong, I'm right. It's like, of course, he's seen things work out where I've seen things not work out. And so, but I feel like just even having that baseline understanding of like, yeah, okay, this is why we see this totally differently. And like, neither one of us is right. There is
Right.
no
It's
right. It's just a lens that we look at these things through. But sometimes we do feel right. Like, no, I'm right. We should save every penny because life is
yes.
scary. And other people might say, no, we should spend because we need to live a little because maybe their parent didn't live past 60. Who knows? Like there's all these different things that I think, and it's interesting, the small T trauma. I think that's because it's good to think about that. 'Cause sometimes we're looking for like the capital T trauma math. And it's
Mhm.
not always like, I'm sure that my children will have some small T trauma when I might be like, your lives are easy. Everything
Yeah.
is fine. But that is just something that we all carry. So,
Yeah, no, for sure. And it can change throughout your life
mhm.
too, right?
Yeah.
Like if there's an illness or an injury or you have a sick loved one and you're helping them. And so that can either activate that trauma and really trigger it from your childhood. Or maybe something has shifted where you let go of some things and you think, okay, no, actually I do want to live my life.
Yeah.
So it's good to revisit those conversations and reassess. I'm sure with your clients, you say,
Yeah.
okay, let's sit down and see
Yeah.
how where you're at and how you're feeling.
Yeah, no, it's definitely something that comes up a lot. And usually when we start, somebody feels like their way is right and the other way is wrong. And I'm curious because especially with the addiction and the behaviors that we're talking about, like how would you put boundaries around certain things? Like, say, gambling or sports. Like, should couples talk about like what is okay and what crosses a line? Because I can't imagine that being an easy conversation. If you want to have some autonomy, not be a nagging wife, or if you don't want to be, like a controlling husband, but like how do you do that when it comes to things like pornography or gambling or things like that in a way that like feels reasonable?
Yes, and I hear that a lot too. I think it's that fear, it goes back to that fear of, well, I don't want to seem controlling, or I
Yeah.
don't want to seem like a nag, or
Mhm.
but if something isn't sitting well, it's okay to use your voice. It's okay to talk about it, right? Even if, because that those uncomfortable conversations actually strengthen your bond. So, like for example, with gambling, like let's say you buy $20 worth of lottery tickets a week.
Hmm.
And you've never really talked to your partner about it, and your partner would probably freak out, or maybe they would think it's okay, but you don't know. That's why
Yeah.
it's good to talk about it. Or that could ramp up and suddenly you're placing bets on
Yeah.
sports.
Hmm.
How don't be afraid to talk about it.
Yeah. No, I think that, yeah. And I think there is, a level of comfort that people have with certain things. Some people might, I remember working with somebody that was like, yeah, my husband goes to the strip club every Friday. And I'm like, really? Like, and that's fine. But it was fine for her. Like, she didn't care.
Mm.
And like really honestly, like didn't care. And then like, occasionally when there's a Powerball thing, like I'll see like these tickets and I don't care about that because it's like it felt more like, okay, entertainment, not like you know, an issue. Yeah, but I feel like that's where maybe the red flags that you talked about before, like when things start to escalate, or it's not just a couple scratch off tickets, it's charges multiple times. So,
Yeah.
but yeah, I feel like there is some like there is always this pressure when it comes to, being, a parent or a spouse or a partner to not want to overstep, but also then
Mhm.
maybe silently building this animosity or this frustration. And
Yeah,
then eventually, like you said, there's like a tipping point or a breaking point that happens. So I think
for
communication
sure.
can be so helpful. Um, what are some communication tips that you share with clients that maybe you want to start a conversation without making it a huge fight?
I suggest this all the time. Not everybody takes my advice, but this is very well known in the couples therapy world. It's called the State of the Union.
Mhm.
So I call it a weekly check-in, just to simplify it. And I suggest pick a time, like a Sunday after breakfast, when everyone's in sort of neutral, nobody's got their back up,
Mhm.
and have a conversation where each of you feels heard. So whatever it is, and always use the I feel, not don't don't use the yous, because
For you.
obviously you're going to get your back up.
Mhm.
Um, so when you have that safe time, you feel like it's not going to be an argument. It's not going to lead into something where you can talk about whether it's finances or work or the kids or whatever it is. I think that's a really good strategy.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think I spoke with another guest about money dates, and it is like scheduled, not just when you feel stressed about money and decide that it's time to
Mhm.
talk, because your partner might not feel like it is time to talk, and you might start, unloading. It's just usually not that effective to have it be like when you're heated, when you're like, I just looked at this statement. Like, so having that kind of, I don't know, set aside weekly time, I think, where people can, where they could bring things up if there's something to discuss can be really, really helpful. And like set aside that time to make that a
Mhm.
priority. I think that can be definitely, it's just a good practice, I think, for
I
people
think
to start
so.
getting used to having these kind of conversations because it doesn't feel awkward if you do it every week.
Yeah, like take 15 minutes. It's
Yeah.
really, right? It's not in the big picture,
Mhm.
it'll help prevent resentment building. And I would say resentment is not a good place.
Yeah. And you also spent some years as a fitness trainer and a yoga teacher and a wellness coach. I'm curious about how some of this that we've talked about can impact people's physical health and their health, how they feel it in their body. And are there any things that you have people look at that are like maybe they feel like it's their physical health is the issue, but maybe, to kind of dig deeper to see how this all can have an impact on everything that we do.
Yeah, I mean, I believe in the mind-body connection. So if you're feeling stressed or you're feeling anxious, or triggered by something, it can have an effect. So you might notice your chronic pain flares, or if you have IBS or you have more migraines, maybe your sleeping is disrupted. Um, Check in with yourself. Okay, what's going on? What's different? Am I anxious about something new? I always encourage mindfulness and exercise. I always say go for a walk, be outside if you can. It's very grounding. It's good for your mental health, your physical health. So looking after all the parts and in a relationship, also giving each other space to have that self-care.
Yeah. No, I think that is always a good, I like having some part of the budget dedicated to um your health and well-being, whether it's somebody likes
Mhm.
to, go to a yoga class or meditation, all the things that sometimes people feel like, oh, should I cut that? Is that necessarily like, I feel like that's such a good, if you're able to calm your nervous system or find ways to do that, I feel like makes everything a little bit more approachable and easier to
Mhm.
manage. So I like that, the thought of, okay, yeah, maybe you don't think that anything's wrong, but you're having more migraines, you're not sleeping. Your body will tell you there is,
Mhm.
we need to address something, even if you try to power through
Yeah.
whatever you're feeling. Before we wrap up, I'm just curious from your perspective, can these types of betrayals ever strengthen a relationship?
Funny enough, yes, I often say this can make your relationship better than it could have ever been because for the first time, you're having real conversations. Because if you grew up in a household where parents kept everything surface level and you didn't really talk about things, and you take that into your relationship as an adult, and there's all this secrecy and not really having conversations. When this explodes and this betrayal happens, and you learn to communicate effectively and you learn to be more vulnerable and connect and make time for each other, you can have an amazing relationship.
Yeah. And what would you say like a financially or emotionally healthy relationship looks like? If somebody's thinking, yeah, there might be some things that I can improve on, or I want to, I love my partner, I want to make this work, or I'm in a new relationship. What are some of the things that you feel like are healthy? And, and maybe that doesn't mean like avoiding fighting all the time or avoiding everything, but like, what are some things that you think are healthy or good practices for people to do aside from just the State of the Union? But what does normal feel like if maybe they didn't have that example growing up?
So I think having time for connection is crucial, like date nights, um, getting off your phone, stop doom scrolling and spend time with your partner, be present. Don't be afraid to have difficult conversations. Bring issues forward. Don't let them fester and grow. And have time for fun. Like, we have enough heaviness in the world and stress, and make sure that you have time to have some fun and also time apart. Like have your own thing, have your own friends in your own life and sports and activities, and then that gives you a chance to miss each other.
Yeah. I like that. I think that those are really, really great tips, especially the time for connection, because I feel like, yeah, a lot of times you're sitting in the same room with somebody and you feel like you're together, but you're not. You're both looking at your little screens while the big screen is on in front of you both, and you're not connected. It's not the same as a date night or having fun, an adventure or something like that is just different. And it's super important, even if it does require money. Like that's okay. I think that's what like we should be mindful of our spending and use that for those connections. And I love the idea of time apart too. I think it is good when people have separate interests, separate friends, and if you have that feeling of, wanting to come home and talk to your partner about the things that, what happened today. And so I think those are all amazing tips. If anybody's interested in, following you or learning more about your work, can you tell us where they can find more?
Yes, so my Instagram is Intuitive Healing with Sara. I have a website, Intuitive Coaching with Sara, and I'm on LinkedIn, Sara Stalker.
Thank you so much for joining. It was really interesting to talk to you about this. And for anyone listening, if you are trying to maybe do some work on your own, money history and thoughts and feelings, head over to mistylynch.com. I'd love for you to grab a copy of my book, Demystifying Money, where there are some journal prompts that you can use that start to really poke at those questions and thoughts that you have about money that you might feel are true. And then if you start doing that work on yourself, it can make all of the relationships in your life with your partner, with your children, with your boss easier because you have, just a better perspective of your own thoughts and feelings. So thank you so much for joining, and we'll talk again next week. Don't forget to share with friends and family, and together let's demystify the world of money. Knowledge is the key to financial empowerment.